Welcome back, everyone, to Somewhere on the Spectrum. I'm so excited for this week's episode because we're going to be talking about an area of navigating this world of autism that I have to be very transparent, I didn't even think about. As an elementary principal, I was so focused on getting those littles into the school, figuring out what was going on with them, get the right diagnosis, the right plans in place, build the right relationships so we had a team with families, and make sure my teachers had the right kind of training to move students forward. That was quite a challenge. And I think that when, as I mentioned before, knowing that that was where I wanted this documentary to start, I stayed in my lane, so to speak. I stayed with blinders on, not even thinking about what comes next. Now, of course, I had groups up to the 5th grade. So as students were transitioning into middle school and high school, which I've spoken to you about before, I was well aware of that transition and what happens with the different programs, because I had colleagues that led those schools and we had these conversations. And we know that it's different at each age level, right, for the students. But I've learned so much on this journey by hearing from our college student, hearing from our entities that are helping with transition out of the public schooling into the real world, hearing from people who have had great experiences and then maybe some challenging experiences. And this week's episode is going to be very eye-opening for so many people, because I am sure some of you out there watching are educators or are parents of littles, even littles in high school. I call them littles as well, as they're growing and developing, but not even knowing what to be thinking about as our people on the spectrum begin to move into their senior years. Now, I've dealt with a lot of different types of situations in my own family when it comes to the aging process. We know that just in general, we're all aging, right? As a matter of fact, I'm aging. I'm getting into my midlife and in my 50s, and life changes even as you transition each decade. But as you get into those older years where things like dementia might come up, or things like the physical ability to move around as easily, or have situations happen with your health that you may no longer be able to be on your own. And then you add the diagnosis of autism on top of all of that, and it can present many, many challenges. I have a family member right now who is going through the beginning processes of dementia. And the person who is doing a lot of caretaking for this person is really having a lot to do. I don't want to say the word struggling, but it's adjusted her lifestyle so much. And what's hard is this is somebody very, very close to her mother, in fact, that it's very difficult emotionally to deal with the change that's happening. When we speak today to our guests, we're going to have Glenda Kroll back on for our 3rd time. And I'm excited about that because she's our one team member who has actually gone through this. Not only is she transitioning into her 60s, getting closer to 70, but she also has her two siblings that she has spoken about before on previous episodes, both different places on the spectrum, but needing to start to think about all of those things that start to happen as our bodies really get into that aging process, and how important it is to plan for that. And that's why I wanted to come on with you all today and really share the fact that I was in that bubble as a principal. I only thought about what was happening in the moment in my world. And as you are thinking about how you support those on the spectrum, or maybe you're currently on the spectrum, being able to have a plan for what will come in the future. One thing that I don't share with a lot of people is that I also do financial advising. And one of the things that I hear a lot of people say is, I don't have to worry about that, I'm young, or I don't have to worry about my retirement because it's so many years away. And I always tell just the average typical person, you do have to think about it, because otherwise what's going to happen is that time is going to move so quickly, it's going to get away from you and you will not be prepared. Now let's add all of the other things on top of it. It's kind of the same thing, right? You need to remember that time is going to get past you. I met with somebody recently, and this somebody said, well, I'll do it next month. And I said, okay. However, remember, next month is going to bring X, Y, and Z, and you're going to be busy, probably busier than you are right now today. Okay, well, I'll do it in June. Okay, but June's going to bring A, B, and C. You're right, you're right. Okay, how about July? And I said, look, these are hard things to do, but we'll always find a reason to put them off because we're too busy. And really, it's more about, just to be completely honest, in the work that I do, we're putting it off because it's uncomfortable, it's hard, and maybe we just don't know the answers. And so we're avoiding making those decisions. Now, when Glenda speaks with you today, she's going to talk from her heart. She's going to tell you, and she's pretty matter of fact, but she's going to give you great information, because she's going to tell you if she could go back and do anything different, this is what she would do. Moving forward, this is what she did that's helping her now as she's starting to deal with some of those situations. Our goal when starting somewhere on the spectrum was to be able to bring information to you. Those of you who are either under the neurodiverse umbrella, or you care for somebody that is, or you educate or work with somebody that is. And I think it's so important for us to share our experiences, our knowledge and wisdom. And we've said many, many times, we're not experts. However, it is interesting to know that many of the stories are similar. Some of the stories are surprising. Some of the stories have a great happy ending, and some have a whole lot of challenges along the way. But our hope is that each of them helps you to navigate what's happening in your world, so that we can really support and become an inclusive society, embracing everybody's uniqueness and helping people understand that a diagnosis of any kind doesn't make you a good or a bad person. It just makes you a person. Just like I wear glasses, just like I have other types of things going on behind the scenes that, maybe not everybody else has. We all have our thing. And our hope is that we continue to give you our best stories, our best experiences, so you can learn with us along the way. As I mentioned, this one was an eye-opener for me. So get ready, get settled, because when we come back from the break, I'll have my guest, Glenda Kroll, who will be talking about the senior years. All right, well, welcome back to Glenda Kroll, who's been joining us through a bit of our last few sessions. And Glenda, I am so excited that we were able to connect because um, so much has come from your knowledge and wisdom that I would not have ever known about. And I bet a lot of us don't think about, because when we're in a situation, right, no matter what kind of situation it is, when we're dealing with our own journey in life, we're so focused on our own journey in life, and we're not really thinking about what could happen here or there, or what this could mean later on in the future for many people. So welcome back, and thank you for joining us as we start talking about our senior years on this journey.
Thank you, Sherry. I'm excited to be here, and more excited that I'm going to help fill in a lot of the, hopefully, some of the areas where people don't even think of, because what happens at this point in time, a lot of people who have special needs, especially autism, don't make it to the senior years. So, and my brothers have now lived beyond than what we had anticipated, what the medical field has been telling us for years. And I'm going through a lot of different challenges now. So I'm excited that I can maybe paint a bit of a picture. And most importantly, my message is that we need to prepare before it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up such a good point then, in all of this, like I said, we've all been on this journey and I've learned so much, but you don't even think about that with modern medicine and all of the advances that we have nowadays, and people are living longer. And then we have to start thinking about that's also going to affect people who typically may have not had quite as long of a life, but we're now in a place where we're kind of in uncharted territory for some people, right? So this is going to be great today. I'm really excited. So your brothers are currently, Stephen is 66 and Michael is 72. You've been in their life since they were young, and you all were growing up, and you've spoke to us about your journey with transitioning from not just being their sibling, but then eventually becoming more of their caretaker, or more specifically, the person in charge of needing to make sure that they were being taken care of. And you spoke last week how it's been quite a journey, and then we have to start thinking about these senior years. And I'm 52, about to be 53 next month, and actually probably by the time this releases, really getting close to 53. And I know that for me, life is already starting to change, and I'm not on the spectrum, and I am more of a typical type of processor. So I'm sure that there's a lot of unknown, but also a lot of confusion when it comes to some of the issues, not just for you as the caretaker, but them as the diagnosed. I remember thinking how when I was at the elementary school, a lot of our young girls in particular would start going through the change, right, in fifth grade, and start to get to a place where were becoming more in their adolescence kind of years and dealing with the different things. And I remember one of our students really having a difficult time understanding what was happening to her in her body at the time. And it was just so hard for the mom to explain it. So then she came to us, and she wanted us to help, and our school nurse. And it really was a struggle for her and a big challenge for her. I see her now, and she's now in high school and doing so much better because now it's become normal for her, right? Whatever her normal is. But I'm sure that changes into this time of your life as well can be very, very challenging to really comprehend.
Well, it's comprehending and seeing that, like, first of all, like I've mentioned before, my brothers are on two different levels. So I got Michael being on a lower intellectual level. Um, he, he's challenged by the fact that he wants to do, but his body doesn't want to do as much anymore. So a lot of exhaustion. As explained to you earlier, where women go through menopause, men go through the loss of testosterone. So what ends up happening at the beginning of the day, they're filled with the energy because their testosterone levels are at the highest at the beginning of the day. And then by the nighttime, they don't really, their testosterone levels are really low. And in some cases, to the part where I see where my brother Michael can't even, by the end of a day, and I'm not talking in late evening, I'm talking about by 6, 7 o'clock at night, he's just so done. He wants the bed. Like he cannot function anymore to even move himself and going. My other brother is the same, but not quite to that level, but experiencing now that there's different parts that are changing in the body. But I want to step back for a second and I want to just talk about, when the main caregiver, such as what my mother was, when, times come and, she is no longer around, we never thought my brothers, because, they always said that people with autism, or as my brothers have, Fragile X, which has a part of autism in it, that they would never probably make it till over 50 or 60. And now my brother will, in less than a month now, be celebrating his 72nd birthday. And my other brother is 66. And as I see them now progressing, what my mother might have done by putting away money, and I'm grateful for that part, but she never really got in what the next step was going to be. So it was finding of what happens to when the main caregiver is no longer there. So, there's documentations and things that you need to have in place by giving guardianship to somebody else. And these are the legal papers that need to be done. Also, the fact of in Canada, I don't know about in the US, but the government is it's called ODSP, Ontario Disability Plan, where they special disability plan that they give to people with special needs, or people have situations, and it's they give out every single month, according if there's income or anything like that. But my brothers don't have any income. But if there's any money above $5,000 in their name, then they lose their disability. So all of this has to be tracked and has to be watched, and that still has to be set up. So in Canada, we have to set up what we call a Henson Trust, so that the money like that my mother had left now goes into a special Henson Trust. And since I've been named executor, POA for my brothers and so forth, I am the one who has to look after all of that. But nothing can go into their name, because then they'll lose whatever disability they have.
Yeah, and
And this,
yeah. I was just gonna say, not to interrupt, but we have some similar kind of setups here in the United States too. I'm a little more familiar with more like when it comes to long-term care and caring for your aging parents or grandparents, just because we recently went through that whole system with my grandmother. But then you add the disability on top, and we do have some additional different kinds of funding too. I'm not 100% aware of them, or nor would I say I'm an expert on them. But for those of you out watching, June, make sure that you're looking into this, because Glenda has a good point. You need to set this up in the right way so that the services can continue to go on. Because I love what you said. We didn't think they were going to live this long. We don't know anymore what could happen. And so we want to be 100% prepared for sure.
yeah, so these are really important things. And as the other thing that I do want to also go on is when I took over, my mother's chores or responsibilities, better word for it, What the most important thing for me, because my mother also, when she passed away, and I took over her whole responsibilities as well as taking care of her at the same time when everything came. But the most important thing that I started venturing out and asking questions was, is there a chance that my brothers could have dementia as well?
Mhm.
And there was not a lot of information, because this is like saying, the world wasn't prepared that usually people with Fragile X or a lot of autism didn't live this long. And hence what I did is, as I started, like, thank God for computers, and I spent a lot of time researching and finding answers. But one of the main important things that I did at that particular time is I had my brothers checked and got help. So I found out what their baseline was. So that way, their baseline is telling the intelligence level, what they're capable of doing, not capable of doing, and so forth. Because when the time came for, which I'm now proceeding to go through with my eldest brother, Michael, is if they do have dementia, the only way you can really tell is by knowing where they were. And if we don't have a line, a baseline of knowing where they were, how are we going to see if things are digressing or not?
Wow, that's a really good point because in schooling years, and I'm going to keep going back to that because that's where I feel my expertise lies. We do these evaluations all the time, right? I don't know how it is in Canada, but I do know here in the United States, we're required every so many years to reevaluate, determine if we want to do further testing to really get, see where the growth has been, kind of things like that. And then, of course, every day in school, we're always assessing how kids are performing. But I am sure that once everybody gets into the adult world, I mean, honestly, I've gone to college, but if I hadn't gone to college, I don't know when the last time I took a test, for myself to
Here's
measure my levels or anything. And I'm a typical woman. And so I'm sure that it's
here's
not something people think.
But the schools were not equipped. This is the whole thing. They could evaluate on a normal child.
This is true. This is true.
They could not properly give a test on a child, or even an adult or anybody. Like, we're looking at specialty tests and special
Hmm.
things. This is
Hmm.
something
Hmm.
that is done in the school, because we need people that are highly educated on the realms of people who have dementia. I'm sorry, with
Right. Hmm.
special needs. So
Hmm.
their testing is very different than what our schools have, because I've gone through that, and my brother went through that, and
Hmm.
they were not capable of doing. So it's going in and finding. In Canada, we have a place called Surrey Place, and they work a lot with children with autism and Fragile X and so forth. In the US, again, I don't know what you have, but it's very specialized testing. And
Hmm.
that's what the baseline gives me now coming forward. Then I did that many years ago. I did that um 15 years ago
Hmm.
when I took over. And now 15 years later, now I'm starting to hit the point where my brother's starting to show signs of things. And is it dementia? Is it not? I don't know yet, but this is my new journey now, heading into this, as we're going to now do a brain scan and do things, so see if we can tell.
Hmm.
um and to move forward. But I'm seeing a lot of confusion, a lot of things that are changing him in his balance and abilities that he's had, and now things are not looking the same. So
Hmm.
the one important thing is which I have, and like I said, a lot of things I don't know why I am the way I am. But when we talked about this, I believe earlier, is that you need to, and parents should be looking at this anyways, but especially if you have special needs children, you need to really be watching their behaviors and all different things, so that you can notice things that are changing.
Hmm.
So, last week I had taken my brother out and I noticed the confusion more in him. And I saw it even more so yesterday when I had just saw him again. And I can see how things are now starting to speed up. Things are going down, as it is. But, like I like to be somebody who's more of I start to look at things ahead of time because now that I see this happening, now I'm already reaching out to doctors. We're already now setting up to do a brain scan to see if dementia is happening because I will need to prepare. And
Mhm.
not that I'm jumping into something, but what
Mhm.
if he becomes a searcher or wants to head out? Maybe where he is now will not be a safe place for him.
Mhm.
So it's always trying to be a little bit of a step ahead instead of waiting for it to turn out to end up being an emergency and then you're in a crisis mode.
I like that, what you said, because you do have to observe so much, right? And keep a remembering, and we all live such busy lives. I'm working with someone in my family right now who's going through some health kinds of things. And I know I recommended to her just because she works a full-time job and she's got children and all of the things. I suggested to her on Friday, why don't you just start keeping a little journal? Keep a little journal so that you can remember, because sometimes we just get so caught up in the world that we wonder, right? Oh, did I notice that? Is that something? I mean, we'll second guess ourselves and then, no, I'll just keep an eye on it. But if you have it documented, I think that that's important. And you mentioned something else too that I want to hit upon. And I think that this is key to every stage through this journey, but definitely through these harder stages like this in particular, um, communication. I think that when you know, and maybe this hasn't always happened for every family out there, right? But this is a good day for a fresh start. But opening those lines of communication within your people, within your, I call them my tribe, right? Within your tribe of people, and making sure that you are communicating with each other, because God forbid, what would happen if something happened to you, and then who's going to step in, or if something would have happened to your mother earlier, and those kinds of things. And we always said that in the schools as well. Make sure you're communicate with your doctors and your teachers and your school people and your family, and make sure we're all on the same page. And I don't think that that ever should go away. Continue to
No.
keep that communication open. I think that that's going to be one piece that can make this a little bit smoother, because there's so many challenges out there that documentation and communication always can be something that could just make it a little bit better.
And I think the other part is I've seen through the years of because I communicate so well with the doctors that are
Mhm.
involved, and as well as the people that all the support staff that are in my brother's home, and even the agency, everybody knows who I am, but there's also a huge amount of respect that I'm been able to obtain from everybody because my whole thing is to be there to make sure that my brothers have as good of a life and supported of life as possible.
Mhm.
And we talk about the communication bit. It's important, like I was just mentioning to you before that I had a family dinner last night and my kids were there, my brothers were there, and because my kids hadn't seen their uncle in a little bit, I wanted them to also, and I keep my kids tabs on how things are progressing, or in this case, unfortunately, digressing. But it's important for them to see so they understand. So if, and I always say, if something should happen to me, they've already know that from as far as I'm saying at this point, everything is set up for my brother. So if tomorrow something happened to me, and then let's say the afterwards, my brothers, something happened to them, they should die. Well, that's all set up already. I've done all of the
Mm.
work. So
That's
that it's
smart
no,
thinking, smart thinking.
it's
Mhm,
it's like I'm going to be going at some point in time. Everybody's going to
mhm,
be going. It's
mhm,
not people don't want to talk about this because it's that horrible thing, but it's a reality of life. And for me, it was a matter of being more like I don't have to worry where they'll be buried. I already have burial plots. I've already paid for it all. Everything is set up. I've already figured out that if my brother trans or de-escalates to the point, I already have a plan where I can go if they have to be moved out of their, or he has to be moved out of his group home that he's in. I already, it was how I get, first of all, instead of having that worry on my head, because I don't want to be sitting in my life
mhm.
from worrying, but at least that if something happens, I already have some form of an action plan in the back of my head. And that's what I did when I took over my brothers. I had an action plan of where I would take off, where I would go to.
Mhm.
And then I did, and everything opened up. The doors, the world opened up, and it happened. And I said, "Oh, it was a miracle." Well, it wasn't so much of a miracle. It's because I took action on what I needed to get accomplished, right? And so to be able to go to your doctors and talk to them and ask them questions and talk to them about your concerns, like I talk to my doctors about dementia happening, and now they're finding that people with autism and that there are now starting to have, I'm seeing out there because I'm in a lot of different forums where they're talking about all dementia amongst people with special needs. It's happening now.
Mhm.
And it's real. And you know what? It's not a pretty sight, but it is what it is. And we the more we're prepared, the easier it is in our lives because we live such busy lives that if you have some idea where to go, you're not going to hit the panic button once it hits.
Yeah, you mentioned so many big nuggets there, but I do think number one, planning for sure, definitely is going to be helpful. And then you talked about, asking the questions. I'm sure a lot of people are probably watching right now thinking, but I don't know what questions to ask. But I like what you said about don't be afraid to ask them. I think that's something we have to remember. If you have something that just doesn't feel right for you, I think we're in one of those situations where there's not a dumb question, right? Because people don't want to
Mhm.
ask questions because they think it shows that they're weak or they're not capable of taking care of something. And I know we need to get past that just in the world in general. But having having that comfort level. I was watching the Today Show this morning, and they were talking about something totally unrelated, but this kind of resonates. Women in their senior years tend to, and there's some research out there that shows this. It's not a big discrepancy, but they tend to live longer when they have a female doctor as compared to a male doctor. And the research was saying that the proof was, that sometimes women who are in these older years and they're starting to go through all of these changes and don't understand what's happening, and then health things get in the way, that they're hesitant. They don't feel as comfortable talking to a male about these because they feel like they don't understand. And I started to wonder, is there research out there, the other way, the opposite way, a male with a male, I'm sure there's research about that. But to connect it to this, I think it's so important that you find those doctors that you do feel comfortable with, whether they're male or female or in Canada or in the United States or down the street or across the city. I think you just have to make sure that you feel so comfortable that you can ask those questions and that you remember that there are not dumb questions at this point because there's still so much unknown just in the
Well,
world of
and if
the
you
aging
if you have
years.
the question, yeah, and if you have that question,
Mhm.
just be vulnerable enough to just ask because you're not silly. You haven't lived through it, so how will you know?
Exactly, exactly.
And the other thing is I now, and it's for a while now, I go to every single medical appointment that my brothers go to because that I will say of things that I have seen, I can ask my brother Stephen is more verbal, so I can ask him and he will talk for himself, but my other brother isn't as verbal, so he'll be more uncomfortable, and to give him that comfort just to even see if it hurts or not. Like that at least is my judging point, is if by asking him if it hurts or things like that, but I'll notice the things. But so when you go to these medical appointments, you again, you're showing your doctor how much this is important to you, and you're there to be the advocate for your loved one. And that's the most important thing that we can all do for them, if nothing else, is be there to support them, to guide them, and to give them that just so they know that they're not alone. And that's a huge thing, that, don't just allow somebody else to take your loved one to a doctor. And I realize how difficult it is at times when we're all working and all the rest of it. But, find that doctor that would work maybe an evening or a Saturday, or somebody that works with you, because that's the whole thing we need. We need people that will work with us. Somebody that's listening to us. And that's why a lot of females tend to listen more as than males do. And I'm not trying to say all men or anything like that, but it's just common knowledge. But the most important thing is that this is how you're supported, by knowing what's going on, by asking those questions, for letting them know maybe how uncomfortable or scared that you are, because this is a scary situation that I'm going to live through. I've already lived through my mother through dementia, which is, those were horrendous years that I lived through it. And now thinking that I could be going through this again with my sibling, and you never know how they'll react or what way things will be. But the thing is it's okay to admit when you're scared. It's okay to admit you don't know. That's what we're here as, even myself as a coach, and you there, we're here that we can support other people who need that support during this time in our in life. And as I'm aging too, it's like, we're all going to go through things.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's kind of go on this journey for a minute. A lot of people don't know this, but when I was in college, I had to work full time, and I was actually a nurse's aide in a nursing home, is what it was called back in the day. I don't know if they're still called that now, because that was forever ago, right? But I remember going through, I had decided to take the job because my program in college was aligned with nursing. So I could decide if I was going to be a physical education teacher or a nurse. And I had kind of questions about that. And I thought, well, let me put myself in a situation where I can learn about the nursing world and determine if this was something. I went through some training, and I'll be honest, of course, this was I was in college. I graduated college in 1995. So like I said, a long time ago, but I was in a class for 6 weeks, and I had to demonstrate different things physically, and then there was a learning component too. And then I had to take an assessment, and I whizzed through the class because it was supposed to be a 12-week course, but I was just quick and was able to go through it quickly and ace the test, right? So I'm put into this nursing home, and there were probably about 50 residents, I would say. It was pretty large. And they gave us like a mentor, so to speak, to train us for the first couple of days. I actually passed out on day number 3, totally passed out, hit the floor, crazy story,
Wow.
broke my watch, the whole 9 yards. And it was a long story, but it was the day I decided I wasn't going to be a nurse. That was for sure. However, I did work there through the rest of the years I was in college, so a couple more years. And I actually ended up loving it. I really did. But having said that, we didn't really get training specifically for specific needs. So we did have some residents that were going through the dementia kind of stages. And those residents were very challenging, because you can get to a place where they're physical and they're very strong and all of the things. Then we had somebody that had MS, and they were younger, but they were at that stage where they were progressing very quickly, and so they needed our support services. And then we had people that were just there because they were over 100 years old and hardly needed any help, but just needed somebody right by their side. I share all of that to say, I'm sure it's very challenging in that world now that people are living longer, now that we have all of these different things that are actually coming into play in addition to just the aging process. Have you found it difficult to find facilities? You said you're prepared, you have a plan to find facilities, and I know you're in Canada, so it might be a little different here, that would have that special training or specialized training, and does that worry you?
Well, listen, when it comes to going through what's going to go, there's still a worry of what will be because, till it manifests, I don't know what I'm going to be really looking at. But what I did, so when I was faced with the fact that my mother was showing signs of dementia, and at the same time, she was the sole caregiver for my brothers. I had the biggest problem that I had to now find places for both of them because I didn't feel that my brothers could live alone in their in the condo that they lived in, which that was my mother's sort of her idea of where they would go. And I was the one who was running constantly all day long with emergencies that were happening. So I knew that I couldn't, and moving them into my house wouldn't be not a proper thing. But I already had an idea of of group homes. So I already was aware of what was already happening because I already kind of looked at that years earlier. But
Mhm.
what I did in the time is I went out to every single old age retirement home in Toronto and I visited them all. So I took, before I actually had moved my mother out, I was finding and dealing with doctors. I went and I did two things that, and like I say, I don't know where things come to me. They just come and I just act on them. So I went to every single place in Toronto and saw some horrendous places that
Mhm.
in a million years I wouldn't have put even my dog into. And when I saw at the same time, I was also asking whether they had worked with people with special needs as well. So I sort of did the journey twice. And then I did the same type of thing when I was looking for group homes. I went and visited all this thing. So yes, was a lot of running, a lot of the time spent, but I sort of, like I said, I prepared myself for the future
Mhm.
so that if I know that if my brother can no longer live in his group home because whether he is starting to act out, whether they are not able to help handle him, I already have an idea of two areas that I can move them towards. Yes, it will be more difficult. Yes, I might have to start looking for some private caregivers or things to help me because I still have a family of my own. I still have my own responsibilities that I need to do. And I already put in more time than most people would ever realize. It becomes part of it's kind of turning into a full-time job, but somehow you just, you juggle your life. But so you go out and you start checking, you see what is available. I spend a lot of time and I research, I go online, I see first of all, what the government offers, what type of programs there are, read through the programs, the grants, all of these things that they have for special needs for, I go on to sites like I go onto Facebook and I already joined groups. For me, it was joining groups that had for Fragile X. I'm involved with the group of that is Canadian Fragile X. I belong to the worldwide thing of Fragile X because I want to know, are there new tests
Mhm.
that are coming out? Are there more things that are available? I need to know all this because, where you get more information is where you have fuel, right? So that gives me, I don't want to be caught for like not knowing, oh, there was a new test that something can be done, or vice versa. Maybe they found out that there's a certain medication that actually triggers more things on. So, the whole idea is taking yourself and commanding the education within yourself. Like I'm saying, thank God for the computers now. So, if your child has autism, there's on Facebook, there's tons of groups, there's support groups, there's things to go on there so you can learn more what your government has. I'm sure in the US, they have their own groups that are there, and they will help support you as well as, most importantly, educate you on what is out there. And as far as your government, it's the same thing, just start doing searches and seeing what your government offers. I found programs for my brother where I didn't have to pay, and I was able to get him into a job years ago to help build himself up. But it didn't happen that anybody gave me these answers. I found them out myself. And we all can do that. And, that's the most important thing. That's what that moves me forward. So instead of, when something happens, instead of me hitting a panic button, I sort of have an idea. And trust me, like we don't know 100% what will happen, and what, whether, if Mike is starting to show signs of dementia, if it's going to be worse or bad or whatever. But at least I have an idea of a road that I might take. And that starts it. And also by going into your doctors and things like that, there's so many tests now that they can do, like just to sort of start it to, so instead of being wondering, start to build yourself by learning, to putting yourself out there. And like I say, I don't care. I was always the kid who keep on asking the questions of why. And everybody got fed up with me. I'm still that same kid who's still walking around and asking more of those questions, because you know what? Here's the thing. I want you to all look at this. My brothers are my responsibility. Your child is your responsibility. Feel that and fill it with that fuel by knowledge. And you have that right to know it, to ask it, and to demand. And that's what I do. If it's for my brother's good, you know what? I don't care. I will demand the answers. I will push through, because that's what I believe in my heart I owe for them.
Oh, I love that. Oh, Glenda, so many huge pieces, takeaways today, just to kind of reiterate and re-emphasize some of these. Communication, so important. Asking questions, so important. Monitoring and observing changes in behaviors, so important. Of course, definitely in these senior years, but even through life, right? Connecting with your right people, with the right doctors, and finding your right facilities and support systems. Just so important. And I love how you finalized it. These are our people. We love them.
Yeah.
They're us. Like, I know I would walk over burning coals for my own daughter as a mama. And sometimes, we think that there's going to be somebody guiding us along the way. And there's not always going to be that person to do that. And so one of our parents in an earlier episode said, I taught my child to be an advocate for himself. And I think we have to do that as mamas and sisters and caretakers and siblings and all of the things, because we need to be that advocate. So much good information. As we start to wrap up today, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to make sure the audience leaves away with? It could be about the transition into adulthood, the transition into your senior years, but something that maybe you just have this burning desire to make sure people hear today.
I think the biggest thing that that I believe in is the preparation into the senior years. And when I say preparation, I mean getting your documentation in order. I'm meaning, if you're not around, who's going to be there? Making sure that, funds are properly set up. Whoever you're going to be putting in charge of, when you're no longer there, that you're going to have someone, here's a common thing that a lot of people I hear from the top agencies, where people always say, well, I'll tell my bank man, the bank will look after things. The bank ain't going to look after nobody, okay, but themselves. Find somebody where it's a relative, if at all being, or a very close friend, or somebody, or maybe a couple of people that will be there, to speak and help your child or sibling to do what you believe is going to be done for the best of their life. And so it's really prepared more than anything else, is being prepared for the best that you can be prepared. And remember, you know what? We're all going to be going one time or another in our life. We're all going to be passing over. That's just the way life goes. Start having those conversations at home. Start discussing it. If you have children, start discussing it with them. Because you know what? The best thing that you can do for your kids is just letting them know, even that discussing their life and where they're planning is important as it is, but especially if you have a child with special needs, you need to know what's going to happen to them moving forward. And so the most important thing is, yes, they're going to change. We're all getting older. We're all changing. The body's changing. The breakdown is changing on what happens as they're aging as well. I'm seeing it all, but the most important thing is to be aware, to be watching, and I say plan.
Powerful, so powerful. And I think that's a perfect tip to end today's episode on. Glenda, you have been such a wealth of information. And I know I've said that before, but just having somebody that's right in the trenches, actually going through it, actually kind of leading the way for the rest of us out there as we start to navigate these final years of life, and how to do them with dignity and how to do them with ease, as much ease as we possibly can. I'm a planner myself, so that pre-planning piece is just so important about anything in life, but especially when there are some extra challenges involved. So thank you once again for joining us, because you are amazing. And I wish nothing but good things for Stephen and Michael and you as you
Thank
all
you.
continue on your journey.
Thank you so much.
Well, I told you it was going to be an amazing episode and a whole lot of great information for you. Glenda is just so full of knowledge, and I highly encourage you to reach out to her, especially if you're going through some of these stages in life with your person that you might need a little guidance, a little extra support, because she is willing, she really is on a crusade to help others navigate and do it to the best ability that they possibly can, even when the times are very challenging. I want to wrap up this week's episode by just saying this journey has been so amazing. We started with the littles, we moved up through secondary public schooling or schooling ages. We went into young adulthood, middle adulthood, then into the senior years. We have just 2 episodes left after today. I'm so proud of the work. I'm so proud of this team. Again, as I mentioned in the introduction, I hope that you've gained a lot of information. I hope that you feel free to reach out to the team members, because they are here for you. That was one of our commitments when we started this journey together. Next week's episode is going to start winding us down. Episode number 7, we're going to have a panel discussion talking about ways communities can come together and support everybody who works with or who is under that umbrella of autism. And I think we've got a really neat panel coming in. I know I've gotten confirmation on a few, a teacher, me as principal, and as a leader, as a business owner. Also, we've got Glenda coming back. She's going to be talking about the different types of housings that she encountered as she was trying to figure out what was happening with her brothers. We're going to talk a little bit about Little League and different kinds of outside of school activities for children and how to best set that up so that when your child goes out to experience typical activities, they can be as successful as possible. And I'm working on getting someone from the Special Olympics to be able to talk to us a little, in addition to a representative who used to be with Autism Speaks. And she'll be able to share some information about that, in addition to work that she did navigating finances for the outside services that were needed for children. I know that it will bring you another big chunk of information, and so I don't want you to miss out on episode number 7 next week when we have our panel discussion, and then we'll start to wrap everything up. Again, thank you for taking this journey with us. It really has been a dream come true, and I hope we've given you just a little bit of information that helps you as you are navigating the world of autism.